It's been the awards night, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity to talk to Jo Jorgensen, who is the former Libertarian presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. We are at the Students for Liberty conference. Yes. We've just seen about 1,000 students coming through today. Why are these sorts of events so important that you would actually take the time to show up?
Oh my gosh, it's the future. I mean, I almost got tears in my eyes watching this. You've got all of these students working so hard. And, you know, my generation just has to pass on to the next generation and the generation after that. Somebody has to carry the torch and change the world.
Well, it's quite remarkable because tonight was the awards night.
Yes.
And it's very easy to walk past people. And I've been walking past people all night long in this corridor, in this area behind me. You walk past people and you don't think twice because you've got your own business going on in your head. And then you see their face up on the screen and you find out this person's responsible for some incredible accomplishment. This really is a movement. The libertarian movement is really a movement of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Now, you would know that better than most as a presidential nominee.
Well, I'm sitting there watching the Student of the Year who has written a book.
Yeah.
And okay, so granted, I'm almost finished writing a book, which will be published soon. But I mean, I didn't even dream of publishing, of writing a book when I was in my 20s. I just can't imagine. They've done so much work. And just to hear the accomplishments about them bringing together countries, about them spreading the word, and some of the places they're talking about, the Middle East, South America.
It's amazing.
They need it.
So I'm going to be brutal, though, because the reality is joining Team Libertarian is kind of joining a losing side at the moment, right? Now, maybe that's not the case in the future, and this is my opinion. Feel free to disagree. But when you became the presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party, surely you knew you weren't going to win. Why did you do it?
Well, to quote Ed Clark, who was our 1980 candidate, he said, if I had the opportunity to sit with every American family around their kitchen table and explain to them liberty, explain to them the Libertarian Party, I would win in a landslide. And so that's what we have to do, is we have to spread the message. Because I look at a lot of these people, they haven't heard of the movement, they haven't heard of the benefits, they don't know how it helps them. And so we just have to spread the word so that, yes, they can see how it can help them. And let me just tell you something that's a bit frustrating for me. So when I was the VP candidate in 1996, I remember, well, first of all, I talk about, you know, how horrible the debt was, how we owed so much money. And now it's 5 times what it was. It's I wish it were back then.
It seems hilarious back then.
But back in 1996, one of the main things I wanted, that I talked about, that I wanted to accomplish, was getting rid of the Department of Education. That parents and teachers should, you know, they should make their own decisions about the students and not the government. Well, now we have 2020 come around. We've got COVID. We've got and part of me wants to say, I told you so, you know, like, because back in 1996, parents are saying, oh, well, we're happy with the government. And it's like, but it's a monopoly. Wouldn't it be better if you got to make your own choices? Oh, I'm fine with it. And now the you know, the Moms for Liberty, the people in Virginia are like, no, these are our kids. We want to raise our kids.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the government just keeps going step by step by step, kind of digging a hole, and more Americans. I mean, I couldn't get anywhere talking with parents in 1996, and now it's really easy to get somewhere with parents.
Yeah. Okay, so the point you make is brilliant because I found the same thing. I've been a political commentator since 2009, 15 years, okay? And early on, no one cared at all. Now, thanks to COVID, actually, it seems like some people do care. What's the best way? I mean, let's be cynical for a moment and exploit the opportunity. We've been given an opportunity to preach the gospel of small government, of individualism, etc. What's the best way to try and engage people right now, do you think?
Well, start where they are. Go to where they are. Don't, for instance, I never, even though at the heart of libertarianism is personal freedom, individual liberty.
Yes, it is.
It's my body. I should be able to make my own choices about me and so forth. But that doesn't mean much to the average person. Most people are not philosophical. They're not theoretical. They're more like, hey, I just want to pay the bills,
they're practical.
Put my kids through school. Exactly. Yeah. They're very practical.
I can't hate them for that.
No. I mean, why? And so they just, want to go on a vacation once a year, buy a new car when their car breaks down. They don't want to care about politics, and they shouldn't have to care about politics. Sure. And that's one thing that, so many reporters on the campaign trail asked me, so I guess you must have been interested in politics at a young age, right? Like what, were you student government?
It seems obvious.
It's like, when did you first become interested in politics? And my answer is, I'm still not interested in politics. I'm doing this for self-defense.
Yeah.
We shouldn't.
I think that's why I like you.
I'm definitely not a politician.
Yeah.
So basically, we start where they are. And we say, okay, you want to raise your kids how you want to raise them. You want to choose your own medical care. And you'd like to be able to have enough money in your pocket to buy a new car if you need it, to go on vacation. Here's how we can give you the life you want, as opposed to... Now, the thing is, this government was smaller before, and so you didn't see a lot of that. But now it's become so overreaching that parents are going, hey, wait a minute. What do you mean my kids can't go to school? And by the way, I'd like to point out about twice as many private schools stayed open as public schools. It was something like in the US, I don't know about where you are. Yeah. But it was about 70% to 35%. Yeah. There was that famous case of a teacher from Chicago putting a picture of herself on Facebook from the Bahamas. Oh, isn't this great? I get to teach from the Bahamas. And the parents are going, what about my kid? Aren't you going to teach my kid?
Yeah. Look, Jo, you're talking my language, maybe more than you know. I'm not sure how familiar you are with what happened in Australia and Melbourne in particular. There was one particular part of Australia that went particularly insane during COVID. So can you just give us an insight? Jo Jorgensen is living life. You're growing up. You're in high school. You're in university. I don't know when it happened. How did you become a libertarian? Because that's not a mainstream thing to be.
Right. First of all, 3 of my grandparents are immigrants from Denmark and Sweden. Okay. And my grandmother used to tell me about, the old country, how they take all your money and not, and
even back then, this is pre-Soviet. This is...
Well, yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I talk about my immigrant grandmother who told me about the old country, how bad it was. And then people find out I'm talking about Denmark.
Yeah.
But, and it's not like they came over here and became rich. I mean, she would tell me these stories from her mobile home. They literally lived in a trailer. And she's like, but America let us make our own decisions. We got to run our own company.
Let us have a mobile home.
Yes, true. And so she would tell me about so hearing about the old country and how great America is and how we get to make, now, of course, we don't make the choices that we used to back then.
Sure. But
we still get to make more choices than, let's say, Denmark. But I would say it was reading Animal Farm in 5th grade. And then...
It'll do it.
And then I get to high school and I find out there's such a thing as student government with a student body president. I'm like, what do you mean one person gets to make? No, like why do we have to listen to this guy? Yeah. Why does he get to make decisions for the rest of us?
Yeah.
I was truly offended by that. And one last thing in high school. So in my freshman year, I was in the band, so I was there playing for the graduation.
You were one of the popular kids. I get it. I wasn't in that group. You were one of the popular kids. I get it.
No. Have you never heard the term band geek? Do they not have that in Australia?
No, not really.
Okay, so there's a term here in America called band geek, okay? Band geek. So the valedictorian, who, by the way, her dad was like superintendent of the school system.
Yeah, so nepotism.
That's what made it so much fun. She gets up there and she gives this speech about, isn't it ironic? Like, why do people stand there holding their martinis thinking they get to pass laws that other people can't smoke marijuana? And I'm sitting there going, Yeah, yeah. Now, I'm.
I agree with the message, but who's it coming from?
But and it was kind of popularized on the campaign trail that my drug of choice is bourbon, and I tell the students that because people think, oh, just because
you're low rent, I'm single malt whiskey, so bourbon's a little bit low rent for me, but you know what, I'll tolerate it.
I'm an American. We're
corn is everywhere.
Well, no, it's the sweetness.
Yeah,
we're born addicted to sugar, and so bourbon's much. I wish two things: that I loved Scotch whiskey and that I loved jazz music, and then I would be.
I will try not to judge you. I will fail, but I will try not to judge you.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm famous. I'm famous. Well, I'm not famous. I was going to say I'm famously known. I'm known for saying drug of choice is bourbon because I like to point out, okay, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's any safer. And in fact, alcohol is one of the biggest killers in the country.
Cigars and whiskey right here. Not good for me. I know that.
So why is that legal and marijuana isn't?
Yeah.
But I would tell people, hey, I think I was one of the few students who I got through high school and college in the 70s, never having smoked marijuana.
Wow.
But it just offended me that, hey, I get to drink my drug of choice. Why can't they have what they want? And it just rather outraged me.
Right now, we have at the Students for Liberty conference somewhere between 900 and 1,000 young people who have come to Washington, D.C. What do you see in them? Now, you've come up through the Liberty movement before I did, no offense, but you were there before I was. That's a fact. And the opportunities and what was possible for you was different to what's possible now. What do you see when you see 1,000 people in a room?
Oh, just excitement. I mean, coming to Students for Liberty, LibertyCon, is so different than going. Well, I shouldn't name the other conferences that I go to. I don't want to disparage them. But it's so different than many of the other conferences because you've got that energy of young people, because young people, they think that enormous possibilities, endless possibilities, that we can do anything. If we work hard, we can do anything. And I am the eternal optimist. So I'm still sitting. I mean, I ran for president on a third-party ticket in 2020.
In America, where they don't have a preferential voting system. Yeah.
Yes. So, I'm the eternal optimist, and I just see an optimism that I don't see in people my age. Yeah. And it's so exciting.
Yeah. Look, I actually have to agree with you, and I want to be the cynic. I actually do. I'm sitting here.
Cynical.
I want to be the cynic.
I'm a scientist. I'm very cynical.
But actually, for people like yourself at that generation, then for people like me at this generation, and then there's the rest, at this generation, the judgment on our actions is not the outcomes. This is my theory, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. We actually have very little control over the outcomes in our lifetime because there are so many factors that go into that. All we actually have control over is our behavior. What we stood for, what we said, what we did. We have absolute control over that. What that achieves, well, that depends on so many things that are outside of our control. So as I stood there, during the lockdowns in Melbourne, Australia, I don't know if you know about them, but they were the worst in the world until China overtook us with, welding people's doors shut and doing all kinds of crazy things.
Weren't they putting people in little lockdown places?
China, they were literally welding apartment doors shut.
Yes.
To lock people inside. And if they starved to death or if they died because they didn't have the right medications, that's their problem. Up until that happened, Melbourne, Australia was the worst, and that's where I lived. And I was on the front lines of the protests against that. So I'm very, very familiar with that. That's not my point. My point is, we do what our conscience requires us to do. And the outcome is actually secondary. I have no control over whether my actions change the destiny of my country or not. You have no control over that. You ran as a presidential candidate in a sort of a third-tier party in a system that has no preferential votes. it's actually not up to you whether you win.
No, but I can change my behavior to be more successful. And in fact, I got more votes than any other first-time candidate in the history of the Libertarian Party.
Yeah. And you helped to shape that movement. Spike Cohen, as your running mate, as your vice presidential candidate, and yourself continue to go on to shape that movement. And I think that's really significant. I go on to try in Australia and shape the movement, even though, did I achieve a lot as someone who was opposed to lockdowns in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia? Well, you could argue I achieved nothing because, Daniel Andrews, the Premier, the governor equivalent of the state at the time, he got whatever he wanted. But at the same time, from time to time, and I'm sure you get the same thing, Jo, people come up to me and they hug me. Grown men hug me and they say, thank you. You changed my life.
Well, but keep in mind, people were afraid in the beginning of the pandemic, and because people didn't know how it was spread. People were asking questions like, can I get it from my dog?
Yeah.
Can I touch a doorknob? Which, yes, you can, but it's like 1 out of 1,000 or something crazy.
I didn't know the answer to those questions early on.
Exactly.
Right?
So people were afraid, they kind of hunkered down, and they weren't really opening up and entertaining new ideas because they were in fear. So you couldn't change their minds back then, but being a leading voice, now people can see, oh, you know what? Yeah. I should have listened to him. By the way, I hope you were inspired by John Stossel in there, doing this for 55 years.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh!
So I've got him hopefully to do an interview with me.
Oh, I hope so.
To have a quick chat. He's a legend. He's amazing.
He's my hero.
But may I say, Jo Jorgensen, you are also a legend, and sitting here and chatting with you for the Aussie Wire has been an absolute
Thank you
pleasure.
so much. I had a great time.
I appreciate it.